this country began to fall apart, the lack of fidelity to process. It's terrible. But I am here this morning to give the 2 minutes goodwill and to say that everyone who has spoken thus far clearly has gone in a direction that suggests an emerging consensus. That emerging consensus is that we really are a country in distress and that we don't want to watch that distress turn into a collapse. By the definition of a fragile state globally, we have gone beyond the threshold of fragility. We're now very close to the threshold of a failed state. And that should worry all of us. I know clearly that this place could have been full, but it is not. Yet, that should not matter to any of us, at least in these initial stages. Why is that so? Because it's always taken a remnant of a group to focus on the most important issue that the people should concern themselves with. I want to thank all the members of the National Consultative Front. Restless Wale Kosh. My goodness, you're too restless. Just going at it, it can be problematic. But somebody's got to do this business of at least getting a nucleus of people who are interested in having, as Baba Ahmed said, a conversation about Nigeria. The second point that I'd like to make clearly is that the reason why the viability of our country is really what's on the table is the non-viability of our country affects everyone. And the non-viability of Nigeria at this time particularly affects those that we all should care about. I was raised by a father who said that the only reason you become a privileged person is so that you would use your privilege for the benefit of those outside of privilege. We're seated here privileged, but every one of us, according to the statistic, and I love statistics, I love data, we're just about, at most, 3 cousins away from poverty. So if you're not poor, your first cousin is not poor, it is very likely that your second cousin is poor. That's a common denominator that brings us together. And the basis of the non-viability of our country, according to research, is our inability to have produced ourselves out of poverty. We've basically not done well on 2 economic fundamentals: productivity and competitiveness. That is what has set us behind the rest of the world that has less possibilities than we have. So this common sensical approach of saying, what would it take to make the Nigerian state a viable enterprise? An enterprise that has viability on the basis of optimization of all its human resources. Because the truth is, the political rascals we're talking about don't care about the human resources. They would sooner worry about a barrel of oil that does not get produced today than they would worry about people abducted and completely forgotten. You know that. I know that. So, to that extent, therefore, this emergence of a consensus toward a drive that allows for healthy conversation. Societies have had these kinds of moments. Unfortunately, Tunisia is a bit unraveling, but you will recall that Tunisia had to come to the place where they knew that simply going into elections would just be a total disaster. And so they first had to, through citizens, the power of citizens, they activated it, just like we're doing with this dialogue. And they got and forced a conversation that led to a constitution on the basis of which elections then happened on new ground rules that ensured that not the kind of the people that you were describing. Okwadike is seated next to you. In Igbo land, we call them Ndi Nkeleka Madu. People of worthless, value. These are people that my father would call hewers of wood and drawers of water. We have become a society that acts in inversion. It is a society where the worst of us rule the best of us. I never paid attention to politics because I was one trained in policy. And so I stayed in that realm of policy until I realized that no matter what policy you did, the politics can ruin it in a second. It was then that it dawned on me that actually Plato was speaking to people like me. He said that you are actually the idiot if you should think that politics is beneath you, because you will ultimately be ruled by your inferiors. Another variant of that quote says you will be ruled by idiots. That those who think that politics is beneath them will be ruled by their inferiors. What is Ezekwesili saying? The best of the minds we have in our country are younger ones, are once again migrating away. They are selecting societies that respect competence, knowledge, that respect character, that respect capacity. And are we just going to sit and watch that happen? I have been very clear that I don't care about 2023 elections. I care about this society having a conversation that would give us the proper structure on the basis of which we can have leadership emerge. Emerging sensible leaders is the easiest thing to do. Once a society can agree the ground rules of the kinds of values and attributes, the shared aspirations, the kind of national vision, a common set of identity negotiated and agreed, then the rest of it just becomes easy. But listen to me, the political rascals would not allow this to happen. But guess what? The political rascals are less than the citizens of this country. You know what the problem is? The citizens of this country have chosen what a good friend of mine called my attention to, Tunji Ladner. He calls it learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is a state of psychological inadequacy, where a person wakes up and says, I am not capable. So it's self-imposed. It is time for us to unlock the power of the citizens of this country. If from this dialogue that we have started, our next step would be to organize the citizens of this country. And I was glad to hear Baba Ahmed speak of the issues. If you didn't see him and he was speaking, you would think any other Nigerian is speaking, right? If you don't see me and I'm speaking, you would think any other Nigerian is speaking. Why? Because the issues will keep us united. But as soon as the issues are taken away, we just become a divided bunch of citizens ruled by a bunch of rascals and very comfortable in calling them honorables and distinguished, when the real titles should be dishonorable and extinguished. The fact is, I find nothing to laugh about, because as a pastor's wife, I live with the poverty of the Nigerian people every day. I live with it. You can hardly see families now that are surviving well. Amongst the lower income class, they are more or less dead, like walking corpses. And yet, look at the egregiousness of a Nigerian bringing out 100 million naira to pay for a form to seek for political office. And you know, that power is for the sake of power, not power to do good. What is the record of the power to do good we have? Do we have a strong record of power to do good? So a repeat pattern of abysmal failure of governance is what 100 million naira is being paid for. And we would all sit in our hundreds of millions and accept it just because we have internalized learned helplessness. It is good that that we have this kind of representation here today. We can do a lot. And I believe that at the end of our session today, we should have a clarity as to the roadmap for doing a lot. When I take charge of the session that I am responsible for, that talks about a pathway to credible, constitutional reforms and credible elections, I'll be able to offer more